The fire crackled in uneven bursts, spitting sparks into the night air. Shadows stretched tall across the clearing, twisting into shapes that seemed alive, as though the trees themselves leaned closer to listen. The scent was heavy charred wood mingling with the metallic tang of alien soil, and beneath it all the faint musk of something animal, something dangerous. The diplomat sat still, every nerve awake, his ears straining for the slightest shift of movement in the dark. The silence wasn't empty, it was waiting. Above the sky was a black sea flecked with unblinking stars, too sharp, too close, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The ground beneath him was cold and damp, the kind of chill that seeped through boots and bone alike. Every breath rose like pale smoke curling in front of his lips before dissolving into nothing. Somewhere in the distance, a creature gave a guttural call, long and low like a warning bell. He'd been briefed about this world. Its predators were not merely beasts, they were legends carved into every military manual, warnings whispered into every soldier's ear. Fur-clad giants with fangs like daggers' claws, sharp enough to shear armor. Huntresses who lived by pride and hunger, who considered hesitation an insult and weakness a reason to kill. The manuals always ended the same way: avoid contact at all costs. But manuals never prepared you for the atmosphere, for the sense of being watched, measured, weighed by eyes you couldn't yet see. He felt it now, prickling across the back of his neck, a predator's gaze dragging against his skin. The night pressed close, every flicker of flame seeming too small, too fragile to hold it at bay. Then came the sound, a crunch of weight on soil, heavy, deliberate, far too close. He froze, every muscle taut, and turned his head slowly toward the firelight. She emerged from the dark like a nightmare clothed in fur and steel, her frame towered shoulders rolling with predatory grace, ears flicking back in faint irritation. The air shifted with her scent, wild musk and iron. But it wasn't her height or her fangs that struck him first. It was the jagged thorn protruding from her thigh, long as a blade glowing faintly with veins of molten glass. Blood matted the fur around it, still hot enough to steam in the cold. She lowered herself into the firelight with a growl, her eyes catching the flames and turning them into molten gold. And in that instant, the diplomat realized the manuals had left out the most important detail. No one had ever told him what to do when one of them sat in front of you wounded, daring you to move, daring you to speak. He had never looked the part of a soldier, much less a diplomat. His uniform was patched in too many places, threadbare in others, the kind of lazy stitching that threatened to unravel if he sneezed too hard. And he did sneeze twice violently when the dust of the clearing caught in his nose. He cursed under his breath, brushing at his face, then muttered something about the irony of interstellar negotiations being undone by alien pollen. The manuals would have preferred someone taller, someone with polished boots, and a voice like carved stone. Instead, the mission had received him a man with hair that seemed to fight its own battles against the wind and lose a face too open to mask nerves, and a tendency to fill silence with words better left unsaid. Yet there was something to him. Not strength, not intimidation, but an odd resilience that didn't match his awkward frame. When he fumbled with his pack, grumbling at ration bars as though they were sentient enemies, there was no fear in his motions, only irritation, only the kind of humor that clung stubbornly to life even in the worst places. He had been told this world was lethal, that its people saw humans as prey, but he had never been good at carrying fear properly. It always slipped through his fingers, turning into sarcasm instead. Where others would pray or hold their breath, he muttered half-jokes at his own expense, a defense mechanism dressed as comedy. Now, sitting across from her, the predator they had warned him about, his mind ran circles. Training told him to back away slowly, to keep his voice calm, to never, under any circumstances, show weakness. But his nature betrayed him. "You've been staring far too long," she growled, her fangs bared. Without thinking, he blurted, "I'm not staring. I'm assessing." Assessing. The word slipped out like an old habit. It was a diplomat's word, a scientist's word, not a survivor's. And instantly he saw her eyes narrow, saw the disdain spark. That was his weakness. He was not built for these confrontations. Not with predators, not with warriors, not with anyone who measured worth in scars. His weapons were words, fragile ones, clumsy ones, often spoken too fast. But there was also his strength. Because even here, with claws a breath away from his skin, he refused to shut up. When others might freeze, he leaned into the absurdity of survival. When the manual screamed fear, he reached for humor. It wasn't bravery, not exactly. It was simply how he lived by refusing to let the universe know when it had rattled him. And now, with her wounded and his heart pounding far too loud in his chest, he realized he wasn't just here as prey in front of a predator. He was here as a human, small, fragile, irritatingly persistent, and unwilling to stop talking even if it killed him. She did not move like any creature he had ever known. Every step she took into the circle of firelight carried the weight of something ancient, a rhythm older than words. The earth seemed to register her passage, the soil compressing under her paws' claws, leaving deliberate furrows. She was tall enough that even seated she would tower over him. 9 feet of fur muscle and presence, the kind of presence that bent silence into obedience. Her fur was not one shade, but a tapestry, dusky gray at the shoulders, fading into streaks of silver and black, each strand catching the flames in glimmers of copper. Along her jawline, scars carved pale lines, where fur no longer grew markers of battles, survived and remembered. The air smelled of her musk laced with iron, the faint sting of blood from her wound, and something almost electric like ozone before a storm. Her eyes were molten amber, unnervingly bright. When they locked onto him, he felt as though he had been measured in an instant, his worth catalogued and judged wanting. The manuals had spoken of strength of savagery. They had not mentioned this intelligence razor-sharp, curious mocking. The thorn lodged in her thigh gleamed with an unnatural light. Its veins pulsed faintly beneath her skin, each beat a reminder that the alien plant or parasite was not inert, but alive, fighting her even now. Blood had clumped into the fur around it, dark and wet, but she held herself as though the pain were an inconvenience, not a wound. Pride sat on her shoulders heavier than the scar tissue. When she spoke, her voice resonated deeper than the growl of predators he had heard in jungles or caves. It vibrated in her chest, in the ground, in his bones. "Keep watching, little human," she warned, fangs flashing. "And I will show you how fast prey can die." He almost laughed out of nerves, out of disbelief, but held it back. Her people, he reminded himself, lived by a code of strength and spectacle. Pain was proof. Fear was currency. Even her sitting there with a glowing shard of alien thorn embedded in her leg was less a weakness than a declaration that she could bleed openly and still command the space. The manuals had called them beast women, but now, seeing her up close, he realized how poor the words were. Beast implied mindless hunger, brute instinct. Woman implied fragility, softness. She was neither. She was something else, a huntress whose world had taught her that survival and pride were the same word, that wounds were theater, that laughter and threats were carved from the same fang. She sniffed at the antiseptic spray he pulled from his kit, nose wrinkling. "Poison. Disinfectant," he corrected. "Keeps the wound from rotting." Her laughter was sharp humor edged in scorn. "My people eat rot. We grow stronger from it. You humans scrub and polish everything like frightened nestlings." That struck him harder than it should have, because it was true. Humans patched, disinfected, polished. They feared what lingered in the dark. Her kind embraced it, let it into their veins, wore it as part of their strength. Yet she watched him work. For all her mockery, her eyes followed every motion of his hands, sharp and calculating. There was suspicion, yes, but also something else, a test. She wanted to see if this soft-skinned creature who spoke too quickly and trembled too obviously could do more than talk. Her culture did not believe in trust. trust was a word for prey. Instead, there were debts. There was dominance. There was the balance between predator and those who survived under their shadow. He understood in some small way that this moment his choice to touch the thorn to risk his hands against her claws was not merely medical, it was ritual. And when her lips curled somewhere between a snarl and a smile, he realized he had already been pulled into it. He was no longer just a diplomat trying to patch a wound. He was a participant in something far older than treaties and ancient negotiation written in blood, pride, and pain. The fire popped, sending a trail of sparks spiraling into the night sky. He crouched, lower tool in hand, heart pounding too loud in his chest. The thorn glowed faintly in her thigh, its veins twitching like a parasite struggling for dominance. He reached for it carefully, but her growl rumbled low, vibrating through the ground and into his bones. "One false move, little diplomat," she warned, "and you will learn how quickly a spine breaks." His throat went dry, but his voice worked anyway. "If I just yank it out, it could shred your muscle. You'd limp for the rest of your life. Better to limp than to trust prey with my flesh." Her lips peeled back, exposing fangs as long as his fingers. Better to bleed than to owe. He steadied himself, fingers brushing near the wound. "Not trust," he said softly. "Mutual survival. You want the thorn gone. I don't want to be gutted. That makes cooperation logical." Her ears flicked back, golden eyes narrowing. Logic is the language of prey. Passion is the language of predators. She leaned closer until her breath brushed hot against his cheek. "Which one are you?" His heart stumbled, but his mouth betrayed him with the same defiance it always did. Maybe the kind who jokes when he should be screaming. For a moment, silence stretched taut between them. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed a deep, rolling laugh that carried both menace and amusement. "You tremble, yet you mock. Bold. Foolish. But bold." Encouraged, he adjusted the tool. The thorn shifted, and her snarl split the night. She dug her claws into the dirt, gouging deep trenches, but she didn't strike. Her pride battled her pain, and for once pride won. "You dare command me to hold still," she rasped, her voice ragged with the effort of restraint. "Prey does not command predator. If you move, I tear half your leg apart." "So yes," he shot back, surprising even himself. "I'm commanding you." Her grin widened, fangs gleaming. "Careful, little human. Some commands are invitations, and I always answer invitations." He swallowed hard, heat crawling up his neck. "Not the kind I meant." "You speak with a tongue too quick for your own safety," she growled, though the glint in her eyes was not only fury. It was something sharper, something curious. The thorn pulsed, its veins glowing brighter as if agitated by their proximity. He braced the tool, twisting carefully. She hissed, claws flexing dangerously close to his arm. "You hesitate," she accused, voice dripping with challenge. "That is when prey dies." "I'm not hesitating," he snapped, jaw tight. "I'm trying not to take half your thigh with this parasite." Her laugh was harsh and short. Threats of failure from a soft-skinned creature. "If you cripple me, I will hunt you until your bones are dust." "Motivating," he muttered under his breath. The proximity was suffocating now. Her heat pressed against him, her breath hot on his ear. Every muscle under her fur was iron, quivering with the effort of restraint. He could smell the sharp tang of her blood, feel the vibration of her growl in his ribs. "You shake," she whispered, voice a husky growl. Not from fear, from something else. From effort, he lied, hands trembling as he pried at the thorn. Her grin curved dangerously. "Effort. That is your excuse, then prove it. Prove your trembling hands can do what mine cannot." The thorn shifted with a sickening crack, half of it jutting free, now glowing venom slicking its edges. She roared, snapping her jaws inches from his nose, and he flinched despite himself. Her laughter followed, wild and breathless. "You flinch, yet you stay. You are strange prey human." "Maybe I'm not prey at all," he said, panting, sweat dripping into his eyes. Her gaze sharpened at that, her pupils narrowing to slits. Bold words. Dangerous words. "My people kill for less." "Maybe your people should try laughing instead," he muttered without thinking. her head tilted, ears flicking forward, caught between outrage and intrigue. Then she laughed again, low and dangerous. "You risk your throat with every word, and yet you live! Perhaps I should let you. I want to see what else you dare." He exhaled shakily, gripping the thorn again. Their eyes locked, predator and diplomat, neither yielding the fire, casting them both in molten gold and shadow. The wound bled, the parasite resisted, and still neither of them backed down. In that moment he realized the manuals had been wrong. The danger was not only her claws, her fangs, or her size. The danger was her laughter, because it meant she had not dismissed him. She was engaging him, testing him, and if he failed this test, it would not be the parasite that killed him. It would be her. The thorn was alive. He knew it the moment it writhed beneath his tool, the crystalline veins twitching like a heart that wasn't hers. A parasite, not a splinter. Its tendrils burrowed deeper every time he pressed wrong, lashing under her skin with cruel intelligence. She snarled, body-jerking claws tearing furrows into the dirt. It resists, like prey that refuses to die. "It's not prey," he said through gritted teeth. "It's a parasite. And if I don't get it out, its venom will spread through your whole body." Her hand went for the blade at her side. Then I cut it out myself. He dropped his kit, catching her wrist before she could strike. His hand on her fur was absurdly small, trembling, but steady. "If you try, you'll carve out half your thigh along with it. You'll bleed to death before the parasite does." Her eyes blazed golden and furious. "You dare touch me like this?" "Yes," he said flatly. "Because if I don't, you die." For a long moment, only her ragged breathing filled the night. Then unexpectedly she laughed, low, throaty, edged with pain. Humans, soft bodies, fragile bones, but bold. Too bold. The parasite twitched again, sending a shock wave through her muscles. She roared, the sound shaking the clearing. He nearly lost his grip on the tool. Desperation surged, and he pulled a lighter from his pack. Her gaze snapped to it. "You would burn me." "Not you," he said, voice shaking but firm. "The parasite. Fire sterilizes." She tilted her head, tasting the word. "Sterilizes. Brutal. I like it." He flicked the lighter. Flame bloomed tiny and fragile against the night, yet the parasite shrieked an unearthly sound that vibrated through the air. Her body tensed, claws gouging stone, but she did not pull away. Her golden eyes locked on him, and for the first time there was no mockery. Only trust, or something dangerously close to it. "You see," he said, sweat running down his neck. "Gentle doesn't mean weak. Sometimes precision works. Sometimes fire. Humans adapt." Her nostrils flared. "Adaptation. That is your species' pride. It's what keeps us alive." The parasite loosened under the flame, and he seized the chance, bracing the tool and pulling hard. She roared, body arching, every muscle fighting to crush him in reflex, but she held herself back. Her fangs clenched so tight her jaw creaked. Almost there, he gasped. "Hold still!" "Say it again," she rasped, her voice shredded by pain. "Hold still." Her grin flashed even through the agony. "You give commands like an alpha. Careful, little human, you may convince me." He didn't answer, too busy pulling. Inch by inch, the parasite tore free, screaming as it came. Black venom oozed down her leg, sizzling where it touched the dirt. The smell was acrid, burning, filling his nose and throat with fire. "Finish it," she bellowed, half command, half plea. He braced himself, every muscle trembling, and yanked with all the strength he had. The thorn ripped free in a gush of glowing ichor, thrashing in his grip like a living thing. Without hesitation, he hurled it into the fire. Flames devoured it. The parasite shrieked once more, then crumbled into ash. Silence crashed down, broken only by her ragged breathing. She slumped forward, arms bracing against the earth, her fur slick with sweat and blood. The wound gaped ugly, but no longer glowing. The fire crackled over the parasite's ashes, releasing bitter smoke. He sat back on his heels, chest, heaving hands, shaking violently. "It's out," he whispered. Her amber eyes lifted molten in the firelight. Prey would not have dared. Prey would not have stayed. He let out a shaky laugh, voice breaking. I keep telling you I'm not prey. For the first time, she didn't argue. Her gaze lingered fierce and unguarded. Something shifted in the air between them, no longer predator and prey. Not quite allies, but something unspoken alive. You risked yourself for me, she said softly, almost to herself. You touched me. You commanded me. You burned me with fire. Her lips curled a smile, both feral and begrudging. And I live. That's what humans do, he murmured, exhausted. We throw ourselves into danger for others. Sometimes it's stupid. Sometimes it works. She leaned closer, breath hot on his ear, her voice a low growl. Be warned, little human. A huntress who owes a debt always collects interest. His heart thudded painfully. Should I be worried? Yes, she said, fangs glinting, but not for the reasons you think. The fire snapped, scattering sparks between them. He realized his hands still trembled, not from fear, but from everything else. The heat of her body, the intensity of her gaze, the weight of what they had just survived together. For all her menace, all her threats, she was alive because of him. And that changed everything. The clearing smelled of ash and blood, the fire still snapping over the parasite's corpse. He wiped his hands on his uniform, leaving streaks of dark ichor that no amount of scrubbing would erase. His pulse was slowing, but the tremor in his fingers refused to fade. He had expected relief when it was done. Instead, he felt something heavier, an awareness of her eyes never leaving him. She shifted slowly, testing her leg. The wound was ugly, ringed in scorched fur, but stable. Strength was already returning to her stride. She flexed, once grunted, then circled the fire with deliberate grace. Even limping, she radiated power, every motion measured. But she wasn't looming now. She was studying him. You gave me back my stride, she said finally, her voice low, roughened by exhaustion. That is no small thing. You're welcome, he muttered, still catching his breath. Her ears flicked forward, amused. Do not mistake me human, I do not bow for kindness, but you risked yourself for me. That is strength my people respect. He almost laughed at the absurdity. Respect. From someone who promised to scatter my ribs across the dirt. Her lips curled, flashing fangs. Perhaps I will still do it, but not tonight. Silence stretched between them, charged in a way that felt different now. Less like a predator measuring prey, more like something undecided. She prowled closer, lowering herself until her shoulder brushed his. The weight of her presence pressed against him, heat radiating through fur and flesh alike. You hold me, she murmured, voice softer than before, not like prey, not like a trophy, but like one you refuse to let die. Why? He swallowed. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Because leaving someone to die when I can help, that's not human. It's not who I am. Her golden eyes caught the firelight, fierce and unguarded. For the first time, she did not sneer at his words. She absorbed them silent, as if turning them over against the weight of her own beliefs. Then her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite a snarl. Something in between. You twist weakness into honor, she said. Strange, dangerous, but perhaps useful. Not weakness, he corrected. Choice. That made her pause. Then with a sudden laugh, she shoved him backward. He hit the dirt with a grunt, and in an instant she was over him, claws braced on either side of his head, her weight pinning him down. You asked if you should be worried, she growled, muzzle close enough that her breath seared his lips. Now you will learn the answer. His pulse hammered, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. And her fangs gleamed in the firelight. Yes. His laugh came out strange, shaky. That's not very specific. It doesn't need to be, she said, eyes gleaming. You are mine now. Not prey, not predator. Something else. Something else, he echoed, heart pounding. Her expression shifted, caught between menace and amusement. Be careful with honesty, little human. In my people it is rewarded in only two ways, with blood or with bond. And which am I getting, he asked, breathless. Her grin widened. That depends how long you keep watching. The words hit him harder than her claws ever could. He was pinned beneath a predator, her fangs inches from his throat, but what terrified him wasn't the danger. It was the realization that he didn't want to look away. She must have seen it in his face because her growl softened into something close to satisfaction. She leaned back, releasing him. Rising to her full height, she tested her leg again, striding a slow circle around him like a huntress considering her quarry. But when she stopped, it wasn't to strike. It was to sit beside him, shoulder brushing his again. The contact was deliberate, not heavy. Just enough to remind him of her strength and her choice. "You smell of fear," she said softly, "but also of something else. Defiance. It clings to you. I like it." He chuckled despite himself, glad to know I'm making an impression. Her smirk deepened. "You have done more than that. You saved me. You endured me. And you did not flinch when I threatened to tear you apart." I flinched a little, he admitted, smiling faintly. Her laughter rumbled wild but not unkind. "But you stayed. That is rare." The fire burned, low shadows lengthening across the clearing. For the first time, the night felt less hostile, less suffocating. He glanced at her profile, the scars, the molten eyes, the strength coiled beneath her fur, and realized she was no longer just a danger. She was a presence that filled the space around him, something his world had never prepared him for, something he couldn't walk away from. "You pulled the thorn," she said suddenly. He blinked. Yes, that was the point. "Not just from my flesh," she said, turning to face him fully. "From my trust. I thought your kind weak, cowards. But you stayed, you fought, you endured. That is strength even my people must respect." The weight of her words pressed heavier than her claws ever had. He swallowed, searching for something to say, and managed only, "Then maybe we're not so different after all." Her lips curved. Different, yes, but not worthless. He exhaled, almost laughing. "I'll take it." Her gaze lingered molten and steady. "Do more than take it. Remember it. Because I will." The night deepened, the stars wheeling sharp and cold overhead. Yet between them lingered a warmth, fragile but undeniable. She leaned back, closing her eyes, as if admitting those words had cost her more than blood. He watched her pulse still unsteady and whispered without thinking, "You're full of surprises." Her voice drifted back, half growl, half amusement. "And you keep watching. Don't stop now." The fire dwindled into embers, painting the clearing in faint orange glow. The parasite's ashes curled into the sky like smoke signals vanishing into the black. He sat with his back against a fallen log, exhaustion heavy in every limb, but sleep refused to come. Not with her so close, not with her presence filling the night like a storm held at bay. She had gone quiet, her breathing deep and steady, though he doubted she slept. Predators didn't sleep beside prey. Predators waited. And yet when her shoulder brushed his again, she didn't move away. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was no longer hostile. It pulsed with something else, something dangerous, but alive. He wondered if this was what survival looked like. Not fear, not dominance, but a thread stretched taut between two species who should never have shared the same fire. Then her ears flicked sharp, her head turning toward the tree line. The shift was immediate, predatory alert. She sniffed once, the fur along her spine bristling. "What is it?" he whispered. Her reply was a growl low enough to vibrate through the ground. "We are not alone." He straightened, pulse surging. "More of your kind." She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes narrowed, molten amber catching the starlight. "No, not mine. Something else." The words chilled him more than the night air. The manuals had spoken of predators, but nothing about this. He strained to hear, and then he caught it too, a faint hum, mechanical, unnatural. The sound of something circling overhead, masked by the trees. A drone, a ship. His mind raced. If it was human, he should have felt relief. But the way her claws flexed, the way her tail lashed, told him otherwise. "They hunt," she whispered, voice tight, "and not for sport." The hum grew louder, closer. The firelight flickered as a shadow passed briefly overhead. He swallowed hard, every instinct screaming at him to move to hide, but his body froze. She rose fluidly, ignoring her wound, her silhouette towering against the embers. "Stay close, little human," she growled. "Your survival trick may not work twice." He forced a laugh, though it came out thin. "I'll come up with a new one." Her glance was sharp, almost approving. But the hum deepened into a roar, the ground trembling faintly as something massive shifted beyond the tree line. The fire guttered out with a sudden gust of wind, plunging them into darkness. And in that darkness, glowing eyes, dozens of them opened in the trees.